Welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck, with me, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, brother.
And joining us once again for, I'm not sure how, is this the second time or the third? Elias Cepeda. Elias is a writer, an educator, a fighter, among other things. Elias, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
We're excited to talk to you among a few pressing topics, one of which is we've been covering a lot of these sorts of like male advice guys. And Andrew Tate being one of those. And the first time we talked about him, David kind of stuck his foot into it a little bit. And look, this is not saying I wouldn't want to fight David. I think David's a tough guy. But we played an Andrew Tate clip, and David said I could probably take him. And I had to remind David that he was a formerly, champion level fighter.
I didn't know.
But that's where David's mind went. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you because you are also in the fight game. Had you heard Andrew Tate? Like, when did Andrew Tate come on your radar?
First of all, I like that's where David's mind went. Hopefully that's my level. That's my cap of toxic masculinity as well, where my mind goes to that too. I tell you, David, he was a kickboxer, a real pro. But if we were to train, or I get some of my people in Austin to train some jiu-jitsu and wrestling for about 18 months, I'd pick you too. He has a big aversion to grappling and ground fighting. So I think we get to train under the right rule set, liberalized rule set. I pick you too, brother.
All right, hell yeah, dude! I love the vote of confidence.
But yeah, I was real late to this to this Tate game, so to speak, and he kind of first came on my radar because some really great MMA fighters started referencing him, and this is after I'd heard some of them start referencing Jordan Peterson, who I'm sure most of them, if it's not through like algorithm feeds, were like made aware of Dr. Peterson through his friend Joe Rogan, who's also a UFC broadcaster and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So that's my first kind of awareness, and that was probably, I don't know, probably a year and a half ago, right? Like I wasn't aware of him. He wasn't, of course, he was a much better kickboxer than I. He was a pro, but he wasn't like an elite level kickboxing champion to the point where, like I knew of him through that. I definitely started hearing about him after he made waves for getting kicked off of this platform, getting kicked off of that reality show, and these fighters started referencing him and talking to him. And just like Jordan Peterson, there's more significant things to say about them and how the evil that they promote. But considering the rhetoric I had heard about him, about being like typifying masculinity and about strength and things of that, just was totally contradicting when I actually heard his voice. The same way with Jordan Peterson, it's just the most squeaky voice people one could imagine.
Yeah, that's interesting because that was actually the first I heard of Tate 2 was in relation to Jordan Peterson's daughter. There was rumors that they went on a date or something like that, and people were like, Jordan Peterson's daughter with the guy who was kicked off like Big Brother reality show in the UK because of sex trafficking or those sorts of allegations. And we'll get to that later because I do think, like you say, like that's some dark evil stuff going on there. But like you say, like he is in the mode of like a Jordan Peterson, and we've talked about this a lot on this show. Like David, they're talking about like shaving. You go on a website that you want to learn how to shave properly, and all of a sudden you're taught like, well, you need to put a bitch in her place. Basically, is what Andrew Tate is, and Jordan Peterson is saying with a slightly less profanity. Let's play a little clip here of Tate just to get people who are unfamiliar with his sort of vibe here. And I also heard, well, before I get into that, let's just play this before I see where else I've seen this guy referenced in the wild.
So the point is, it's not just about physicality anymore. Yes, being a rich dork is not enough. You need physicality. But if you're strong and broke, it doesn't change anything. Let's pay attention. In the animal kingdom, testosterone promotes aggression, but the aggression is a service of status. You are aggressive for a reason, to be respected. In the modern world, that's not quite possible. If you're aggressive all the time to be respected, you end up in jail. Doesn't work. So now, We've changed that with a consumerist aggression. Luxury spending asserts dominance in an age. Our weapons are perceived as what we wear, what we drive, rather than our fists. The highest expression of masculinity in an evolved age should be what we wear, drive, live, and our ability to move the world with money. That's a top G. That's the big gorilla. Do you understand? That's the strong guy.
Right. So what I find fascinating about this is I was at barbershop a year ago, and I told the guy what I did, and he seemed into it, wanted a recommendation. I was upfront about the politics, and he got into recommending Andrew Tate. And what fascinates me about Andrew Tate is like that stuff, he almost says it in a tone of voice like he's criticizing it. He does all this stuff like rich people are dumb, but also they run the world, and he like naturalizes it in a certain way, and like that's like the whole sort of like he's like I've been to the rich area, and like and it's there's like this kind of critique, but it's also a reification of it, or like a sort of validation of it.
Yeah, I think I get that as well from him. And he has a tendency with regards to like discussing, wealth or, the lack thereof, and then trying to get towards it. He like repackages the problem as a solution, and and the solution and the source of felt alienation as like the solution to it. And like there's this acknowledgement that like in the young men in particular that is let's assume that's his audience consists
Mhm.
of, that this acknowledgement that they're hurting financially. And he lets them know that yes, it's actually, you should in fact be angry. His analysis and his critique isn't a systemic one, of course. He basically is implicitly telling them to blame themselves, and offers up as the solution the same cruel system that impoverishes us and is responsible for the situation. And I think, I can't speak to everyone's situation, but it occurs to me like among fighters and at a high level, especially who, for a number of reasons, from culture and their base sports, whether it's like wrestling or boxing or kickboxing or even jiu-jitsu, up to the conditions that they work under, if they make it to the top, the best level, which are even more exploitative than like other sports that we see on ESPN. That fits in line. You're supposed to work harder. You got to focus on the work, your individual work, what you can do, and not really consider externalities or your place in being able to like influence that. And of course, in a day-to-day level, that's often like good advice, right? Like, you've got to accept the things you can't change and affect the things you can. And of course. So I think it's like you said, by acknowledging that people are hurting or feeling alienated or really broke, he in a way that maybe others or the like a liberal establishment might deny. He gets kind of his little entryway. It's like a little sensitivity, but then right whack with the tough talk and shaming you if you're not rich.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like hits at a fundamental point of all of these kind of like TikTok finance side hustle huckster guys, which like and like a challenge for like the left, people who want to do something different, is that like I make this point to folks all the time. It's like they talk about like some of like individualism, like even amongst like working people in this country, like this idea is like I just got to get my money right, I got to find my way out, and it's like you know I think that people need to recognize on the left that like in the absence of like a real working movement or real left politics, it's like that's sort of what you have to do if you don't want to suffer. Do you know what I mean? Like that is sort of like the option. It's like you either have to fight or give in, right? Our idea is that we want to build something different, so that's not the calculus. But like the thing about Tate in particular is that like there is this, the thing that's so funny about him is that like he really wants to represent himself as like a guy who has like tremendous amounts of power and influence, but he's sort of like, I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And basically is just saying, like, yeah, there's a conspiracy about it, and what you need to do is get in on the conspiracy versus like taking it apart, which is like why all this Matrix talk is so funny, because it's like you're literally promoting the Matrix, like by their definition of it, you're promoting it. You're saying it's rat race, it's like fetishizing commodities, luxury cars. I mean, these are people, they do that, right? They're not even just like, oh, I don't give a shit, I drive whatever. It's like, if you've seen any of their stuff on TikTok, it's like, look at this nice ass vehicle that I got, right? Or this watch that like doesn't seem that expensive, but it's actually $300,000 or whatever. Yeah, so it is like the most like matrix pilled kind of content in a lot of ways.
And I think it's impressive how broad the audience he can market to. Because on the one hand, with that one statement he makes, the rich guys, they're weaklings. Well, that appeal as a non-rich guy, I have something I'm empowered on over the rich guys. And if I can just figure out this money thing from this guy Andrew Tate, I'll have both. I'll be crushing it. And then if you're a rich guy, i.e. somebody who has too much money, who might want to pay like Andrew Tate's company $3,000, are like, shit, I have all this money, I'm not getting laid at all, and I need to figure out how that does. Again, like we'll get to some of the claims and some of the hot water Andrew Tate is. It's a little bit ironic that he very regularly mentions jail and things like that as like a low status thing, and now he's under house arrest. One more gist of his sort of, this is if you go on to TikTok and search Cobra Mindset, which I wish Kobe was around to sue. Like, I don't know, like this guy's Cobra, but here is another Cobra Mindset. This is again like kind of this class politics type of thing.
When I was broke, if someone told me they had 30 or 40 grand in the bank, I thought they were doing good. Now I'm sitting at a table, everyone's wearing $100,000 watch. Nobody gives a fuck. It's just like there's levels to the game. And when you get up to the top, you realize there's money everywhere. The abundance mindset, there are so many rich people. So if you're not where you want to be financially, I hope this pisses you off, because I'm telling you to annoy you. But you're sitting there struggling to pay your bills. There are people out there making so much money you couldn't possibly fathom. And you may sit there and go, oh, but they're miserable. A lot of them are. Trust me, they're having a great time. So you need to make a bunch more money because there's money everywhere.
Yeah, so easy as that. I mean, I just say it's really gross, and I didn't really notice this when going through these clips on TikTok, but to put pictures of actual people who are poor and houseless as like, you should be mad that you're in this bad financial situation. Just go out and get the abundant cash. Like that's pure, like that's exactly what Jordan Peterson would be saying, or all these sorts of guys that want you to blame yourself for your position in life.
It really would. It really would be. And I do think, I mean, again, to my entry point into him, I think it really appeals to a lot of, let's say, like fighters who are in the big leagues of mixed martial arts, which is UFC. They, as opposed to the other professional athletes that we see on ESPN or Fox or what have you, don't have collective bargaining agreements, don't have associations, and they, as a result, they get smaller shares of this league, so to speak, revenue than do any other athletes of any major sports that are like at that level or slightly above. And so it's not about total amount of money, but percentage of revenue. They get far less, and it bothers them. And like on a personal level, they've put in the type of work that any worker has to get to the top of their level. Any of these athletes who are making billions for their employers, and they don't even have the ability to be considered. They're not even considered employers. They're considered, they have all the responsibilities as employees, but they're, for tax purposes, the UFC keeps them as independent contractors. A designation that probably wouldn't hold up. It'd probably fall in the right jurisdiction with the right suit, just like Uber faced difficulties holding their drivers into that category. But it takes someone willing to be like a Kurt Flood from the MLB to get blackballed and stuff to do that. And so this type of stuff really bothers them. They're expected to kind of show out in their communities. They're expected, to have money and to help their families the way other athletes do, because now they're on TV and they're not able to. The mythology in the community, the MMA community, was like, hey, once we get on TV, once we get on cable, once we get on network TV, then the rising tide will raise all ships. And if we just increase the amount of revenue, it'll trickle down to you all. But it hasn't. It's getting worse. The UFC has consolidated like its main competitors the last 20 years. Now, not a direct competitor, but a place that at the very, very top, the most popular UFC fighters were able to leverage possible contracts with the WWE. Pro wrestling organization against what they had, or leverage their fame from the UFC to that. Now those companies are combined. There are Emmanuel, and so they just have less and less power. And this is they feel the same pressure to have these watches and these houses and these cars and things of that nature. That's why you see even like a guy like Conor McGregor at press conferences wearing jackets that with the tag on it because it's not his. He feels the pressure to like wear borrowed stuff and things of that nature. But yeah, no, it's I think it's athletes of all kinds at the top level face issues from overspending as a result of like this kind of consumer mentality, what he calls like a consumer demonstration of power or whatever the hell he said.
Right.
But UFC fighters are particularly like under equipped to fill that role. But they want to, and that's why I think they're also like they have a hustle culture. They're entrepreneurial, to put it benignly, but that's why they might have, hey, let me get this, let me open up my own academy, or let me even more, let me take the sponsorship of this deal from some NFT company, or let me let some rich weirdo hang around me to give me cash, and like they're really scrapping. They're looking for these ways, and they're being told that there's a way to like to get an alternative source of income, and like their whole existence is already like considered an alternative source of income. Like a lot of these guys, because they were wrestlers, are college educated and stuff, and everyone around them a lot of times has told them like this is a weird thing to be doing. It's a sport that has been banned a lot. So I think it fits in with their mindset, this grind, this hustle mindset, this like we've got to work outside of the normal structure and markets to make money. I think it fits in really, really well with them, as was in addition to like this emphasis and obsession with like a certain type of masculinity.
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating because the last time you were on here about a year ago, we talked about some of those labor and classification stuff, and I mean just as a contrast, we also talked with Wosny Lambre about the formation of the NBA Players Association, and how that was, that's a model that I think a lot of these fighters should need to take, or would be nice to look at. And before we get a little bit more on unions in the fight game, I do just want to put in this for folks because this is really dark. This program, this is a deleted web page from Andrew Tate. And just I'll just read a little bit from this. Who am I? My name is Andrew Tate. I'm a retired 4 times world champion kickboxer who is now a multimillionaire, and I'm the most competent person on the entire planet to teach you about male-female interactions. How did I become rich? Webcam. Now, up until the how did I become rich webcam thing, this looks to me like kind of standard pickup artist thing, which is like, how to help under socialized men get over the hurdle of social anxiety, which is like mainly, it's not a problem of like what you say, like say negative things about them and they'll like you. It's more of you just need practice being in a in a space with women and like interacting as human beings, and a lot of this stuff will be solved. You don't need to pay Andrew Tate $3,000. But anyway, the second part of that, how did I become rich webcam? That puts up a little bit of a red flag when it comes to the charges of sex trafficking that he's currently alleged against him. Continue. Why am I an expert on all male female interactions? I've been running a webcam studio for nearly a decade. I've had over 75 girls work for me, and my business model is different than 99% of webcam studio owners. Over 50% of my employees were actually my girlfriend at the time, and of all my girlfriends, none were in the adult industry before they met me. Literally, that was my job, to get women to fall in love with me. My job was to meet a girl, go on a few dates, sleep with her, test if she's quality, get her to fall in love with me to where she'd do anything I'd say, and then I'd get her on a webcam so we could become rich together. Now, that might sound impressive to you if you're a young man. What you need to interpret that as is that is something a pimp would say.
Yeah.
Right? They're not going to say that like I'm actually I have like tracking software on all these women's phone. They were in complete poverty or desperation when they responded to the ad that wasn't upfront about what kind of modeling they would be doing, and now all of a sudden I said, "Oh, if you go and talk, I'm going to kill you." Like that's the kind of situation. And I'm not just saying that about Tate, but that's how these things go, right? Like these sorts of webcam things. Where it's like one guy or a group of guys making a whole bunch of money running a bunch of girls, they do exist, and it's fucking disgusting. And all these platforms, I don't think cops are the answer to this. I think ultimately you need to get to a position in society where women don't feel the need to do modeling on Craigslist to provide for their rent. Like that's the way I'd provide this, but that's not to give this stuff a pass. Like I think this stuff does go on, and I like the way Andrew Tate describes it himself. I am not surprised that legal authorities would look at him and be like, we're going to look into this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he's describing like systematized psychological manipulation, which is necessary for trafficking, and he's talking about monetizing that. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of like the general outline of what one would do, or at least the sourcing of that labor would be
Mhm.
the trafficking. And it's not like that if it weren't so gross and violent, that it would be comical type of language just because he's pathetic. It's not in a vacuum either, right? Like he on talk shows and podcasts and all that stuff, he routinely um blames rape victims and says it's their fault, and like it's just part of an overall, he's hit women on camera, and I mean all sorts of things like that. It fits within a larger pattern as well. And like this obsession with masculinity of a certain type is like it's in their mind and their structure. It's like a masculinity under threat from like a matriarchy or queer people, liberals or whatever. So yeah, and I think it's like if you're sitting there and you're like feeling powerless, you're feeling awkward, and you're feeling the pains of being broke. You don't know exactly where to direct your anger. He offers one of the few places that any man in like in the global north or western society or whatever might, maybe even in other places, might feel they can easily get over, and that's just like a woman, right, or girl. Like
Mhm.
I can easily put myself in a position of some type of superior power or hierarchy. I think that's the appeal there to people.
I
Yeah.
think no, I think that's like a crucial point because they all do this. All these kind of manosphere is the term for them, right? Influencers, and like I also think that it's not without noting too that where he ends up getting in trouble is Romania, and if you've seen a lot of his other comments on being out in Eastern Europe, he talks about, well, a lot of these girls are very beautiful and they're very, very poor. He makes that point a lot, and we have to remember too that these are countries that have been completely decimated with the fall of communism and the rise of capitalism in these countries, where like people are living in really, really dire situations after capitalism has really ravaged those nations as well.
Yeah, and he also say specifically like, hey, I'm the it's harder to get arrested for rape, yeah,
Yeah.
and get like
Yeah.
arrested for trafficking or extradited and things of that nature. And again, this is a guy that's like admitted to what is sexual assault. So yeah, I mean it's pretty out there. And by the way, like it's really sad, but like the name dropping and the referencing and the uplifting of his name by MMA fighters is not like curtailed at all
Hmm.
since he's been arrested or anything of that nature. It's actually like him being banned is added to his like ethos of credibility. Again, this particular group is again used to being vilified and not given a fair shot. So, and they might have what under ordinary circumstances would be like a healthy skepticism of like the man or the system or mass media. And so anyone banned there is might have more credibility in their eyes. But like, yeah, it's
Hmm.
actually they've been even the UFC middleweight champion, he just became champion again. Israel Adesanya is he's been going on the offensive in recent months, really defending and lifting up Tate, and really criticizing anyone who would say it's distasteful to associate with him, all like post arrest.
Yeah, that's depressing. I know the young YouTube streamer Aiden Ross is also on the Andrew Tate train as well. And just on that note, if you are one of these guys who is skeptical of the man, Andrew Tate there's on video talking about how his dad was a CIA agent. So just to throw that out into the soup
Yeah,
as
but being a
well.
is cool somehow, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Now, oh God, that's the
That's not
last thing
part
we
of the
need.
Matrix, though, y'all. The spies is the White House. The CIA is trying to take down the Matrix, right?
Yeah, that's the last thing we need is to undo the work that Tucker Carlson's been doing with regards to making the CIA seem uncool to these guys. Like, actually, though, it can make you get ladies and be a cool boxer. Um, yeah, I want to. I also, while I was scrolling TikTok, I think probably because I was on Andrew Tate stuff.
Also, like, wait, sorry, not
Yeah,
to
go
cut
ahead.
you off, Matt, but like, I don't know if you're on these things, friend, but like, I get, and I think it's probably because I watch them because I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll use this on the show. Like, I get like an Andrew Tate video every single day, like 5 or 6 of them like in a row. And I don't know again if that's just like me by watching them like feeding it, but like I'm highly exposed to this guy and a lot of these other like highly misogynist, really nasty folks out there. And I know I'm probably feeding the algorithm a little bit by watching it, but I also don't think that it's that far off to think that like a lot of people are just getting inundated with this stuff
Yeah.
without even necessarily seeking it out, which I think is an aspect of this that is like really pernicious, right? Where like, you're just sort of being flooded with this like nasty stuff. And if you're a guy who spends time on your phone flipping through videos, I mean, it's not that unlikely that these are exactly the kind of audience that they're trying to reach with this stuff.
No, I mean, I think it's to the point where like if you search fight stuff, if you I find as well, like if your own content or if you watch things that are critical of like the Democratic Party,
Yeah.
that is like they assume you want to see this type of stuff. This is an analog. I won't get to it, but I have a kind of like a self-defense like philosophy exploration project, like an armed self-defense thing from the left, and I feel like that's another space where if you're like, how do I clean this rifle, then all this stuff like
Yeah.
Nazi track, like there's very few left like spaces that are in like on YouTube or accepted that get, it's all right-wing stuff, even if you just want to like anything at all related to anything. You want to find like of the right solvent for like a polymer, it's like they assume that you want to do CrossFit with Marjorie Taylor Greene or something. It's
Yeah, I mean, my dad uses YouTube for bow hunting crap, and he fucking heard 2 of his bow hunting show guys talking about Ben Shapiro, and it's like, god damn! Like, first of all,
this
I
man talking about another manly man, dude. What are you?
well, to me, it's like I thought better of bow hunters, like Ben Shapiro. Like,
I mean, that's a whole dude. That's a whole other conversation. But like, I'm not trying to be toxic or anything like that. But it's like, honestly, like Tate's one thing, but like Ben Shapiro, like I've met guys who are like they're tough dudes, like they're right wing, but like whatever. And I respect them in the sense of like they're strong, they're capable, they can do things, and then they like worship the
Right.
biggest corp in existence. It's hard to wrap my head around.
With a member of our gym on Twitter, he and I would just here in Chicago. He's an organizer, he's an academic, and he's also he trains. And we were just saying, like, man, imagine being Israel Adesanya, amazing fighter, like just as tough as they come, super skilled. Like, I'm not going to bring manliness into it, but like just a tough person, right? Like, imagine being him, and then thinking you need to look up to Jordan Peterson. Right? Like, what? That's so sad. Among other things, it's really sad. It's really the insecurity he must be feeling. If he's that guy, but he thinks he needs to look up for like discussions of how to uplift, toughness and manliness in his mind, he needs to look up to these guys. It's really sad.
Yeah, it boggles the mind, honestly. I want to move kind of adjacent. There's this clip on TikTok of Jesse Ventura talking about why he doesn't trust Hulk Hogan, and I've actually produced a interview with Jesse Ventura for the Tarfu Report with Mete Ben Perrine. He's a nice guy to get on the phone, very affable, interesting guy. I'll be honest, even though I'm from the kind of North Dakota, Minnesota area, I haven't followed Ventura stuff super closely, but I do know that he was kicked off MSNBC for Iraq War stuff, and as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty based.
Can't trust him. I'm not friends with anyone I don't trust. I have to have a trust with someone to be their friend, and he's the one that ratted me to Vince when I tried to unionize. I found that out under federal deposition when Vince was put under sworn, and he didn't hesitate at all. I told my lawyer the story, and in deposition you could ask about anything. And so I wanted to know who ratted me in the locker room, because there were no agents, no one from the office was in there when I did it. So it had to be one of the boys. And when my attorney said, Mr. McMahon, has there ever been a union in wrestling? And Vince said, no. He said, has anyone ever tried to? And Vince said, well, I think Jesse Ventura spouted his mouth off about it once before. And my attorney said, did you hear Mr. Ventura? No. Well, then how do you know he did? With no hesitation, Vince went, Hulk Hogan told me. And I didn't show any emotion, but I almost tipped over in the chair because he was my friend. Damn. And I thought, but then I understand why. When we went to court, I saw in WrestleMania 3, Hogan got paid more than all of us combined. Now, why would he want a union when he's getting taken care of? Imagine that, WrestleMania 3, 93,000 people, and he got more than Andre the Giant and all the rest of us combined. If there was a union, would that happen? No.
Damn. Did you know that story, Elias?
Yeah, I'd heard him. I hadn't seen that clip, but I heard him say it. He's had occasion to like bring it up a few times. And it's definitely illuminating, right? Because like I'm imagining. So Jesse Ventura had his own lawsuit situations with what was then the WWF. Also, like Vince McMahon, the chairman, longtime chairman, who inherited from like his dad, which was the WWF at that time. Like he's also had like lawsuits with like steroid use and the federal government. Now he has more recent stuff about being a sex pest. So I don't know which like what case a deposition would come in. But yeah, Ventura's talked about that, and that's interesting. Like I guess from his telling of it, he tried to organize before WrestleMania. He wanted a big pay-per-view to get in an informal thing. He wasn't working with like a local or something. He just was doing it kind of organically, like, hey, let's get the people in the back, that basically the boys, and try to agree on a base level of compensation, and let's go as a unit to.
Yeah, so we had you like leading up to WrestleMania 3 on the different pay scales.
Yeah, so I guess Jesse says he tried to get everyone on the same page and use to get like some type of base pay, and then if they were all together, they could use the specter of withholding their collective labor and make Vince lose, millions upon millions of dollars. And it fell apart, I guess, because they lost the element of surprise. The guy known as the Ultimate Warrior years later apparently kind of did this as a one-man kind of threatened to like withhold his labor and got a big pay boost for McMahon right before WrestleMania, and something that is talked about in like pro wrestling lore. McMahon was so upset about this and said he felt betrayed and stuff. But even one person, a star at that time, was able to like use the possibility of the right timing and withholding their labor at that time to get a better pay situation. But yeah, Ventura's that's I guess he had an insight into, because he had some type of semblance of like consciousness and labor consciousness. He had a little head start on all of us and what type of scumbag Hulk Hogan turned out to be. I mean, he's a racist, but it turns out he's also just really not one of the boys, not one of he doesn't have that type of collective mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it really I found that really fascinating. I've been seeing a lot of like stuff for Hulk Hogan documentaries and it's like that's the one I want to see.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, Elias, you're a Chicago politics watcher. Here at Left Reckoning, welcoming generally of the Brandon Johnson victory for, especially over Paul Vallis. From a national politics perspective, I was just interested in the guy who is sort of a teachers union person beating the person who is the sort of COVID. We should have forced schools to reopen, and the teachers union got in the way of that. So like that proxy fight was why I was interested in that. But you have on your Elias Cepeda Substack, you have a critique of some of the new, I guess, triangulations, let's call them, of Brandon Johnson. I'm just curious where you're feeling about the mayor in Chicago.
So I'm glad that we are going to have a different mayor than we had. We had a one-term mayor. We'll be a one-term mayor, and Mayor Lori Lightfoot. For reference, it is very difficult to be an incumbent in that position on the fifth floor of Chicago City Hall and lose. She was awful in the way that her predecessors are awful, just neoliberal terrorism in terms of, emboldening police. We have a particularly lethal police force and a particularly lethal American police system. She targets, she's a black a lesbian, but the way she at once like really condescended and then also materially targeted black communities in Chicago. It's a very segregated city. Was really sad, and just her contempt for democracy, broadly, her contempt for the press, just really mimicked like Rahm Emanuel before, who was just like a reiteration of Mayor Richard M. Daley and then Richard J. Daley, his father, before. So I'm glad we have a new mayor, and it was nice to have someone who, for a brief period of time, was involved in union organizing, and who for a brief period of time was a public school teacher in Brandon Johnson step up, because we also had this Paul Vallis, who Chicago is one of the many cities in which he's just come in and decimated the school systems of. It also includes other places like in Arkansas, places like I think in New Orleans as well, just privatization and emphasizing like testing mandates without them being funded. Just a real bad approach to education. He's run before, and he's just not popular. But he had big backing from the Fraternal Order of Police in Chicago, and which is a very like the FOP in Chicago is not just like, oh, Republican in a Democratic city, although it's not an ideologically Democratic place or anything like that. But they're not just MAGA. They're like QAnon, right? Like the head of, I mean, like literally, right? The head of that union can't even like carry a gun and have his badge because he's been ordered to, like, he's not allowed through misconduct. They really got behind Paul Vallis, who has a son in San Antonio who killed, I think, an unarmed black guy. So they were really getting behind him. Mayor Lori Lightfoot gave the police everything they wanted, increased budgets, but they still hated her, probably for reasons of racism and like the fact that she rhetorically said she would hold police accountable in her previous job, and then as mayor, even though she did not, right? So he rose, like he had a really big rise. So it was nice to see Brandon Johnson come in. Now, Brandon, he also like had a platform or a recent career trajectory of like saying, I am calling for the defunding of police because we need to put we need to reprioritize our budget towards the things that actually we know actually like prevent crime and by alleviating poverty. Chicago's a very, very rich city. Like Andrew Tate says, there's money everywhere. Money's floating everywhere, right? There is a lot of cash around. It doesn't go to the places that with people of most need. And he'd run in that. He was a protester. He was going out. He was doing all that type of stuff. Had also had fought with the city for teachers' contracts at a time where they were doing strikes and things of that nature. So he ran on that. He ran on like broadly, at least democratic, like socialist types of ideals and stuff like that, anti-empire in a symbolic way, because he's just a mayor of Chicago. In the final 2 weeks of the election, however, he backed away hard on two things. One, materially will matter in the media. He actually backed down and said, no. I never said that I wanted to take any money away from the Chicago police's budget. He did. He protested. He had loudspeakers. He was on the streets, right? That's why people backed him. But he said, no, I promise not one penny will be taken away from the budget. I'm going to hire more detectives. I mean, basically framing crime prevention in like a 1993 like manner again as well, right? Because we don't close cases here in Chicago, so we just need to promote more of these Nazis to like detective positions or what have you. And then he also went, because he was so insufficiently prepared. He couldn't define. It was like during Passover and during the campaign, he was going to a Jewish group. I don't know if it was in a synagogue or not. Probably just like a Reform synagogue. And they asked him to define anti-Semitism. Now, a lot of times in our in our society now, depending who's asking that question, it's a loaded term, right? And they what they really want to know is how you feel about the state of Israel and things of that nature. I don't know the intention behind this. In any case, he didn't have an answer. He mumbled. Like anti-Semitism is actually like a real scourge upon the earth, right? And he did not have. He's a very eloquent person, and he had no answer for that to define it. Feeling the pressure of that, a few days later, he went out and said, "I define I'm paraphrasing, but the quotes out there, including in the piece, I define anti-Semitism as criticism of the state of Israel, saying that the state of Israel has no right to exist." So in the last 2 weeks of his campaign, he stood up in favor of apartheid and in favor of the continued overfunding of the Chicago police that are terrorizing our poor and racial minority groups. And in the case of apartheid, it's a symbolic stance, but I think that's even worse because when someone who will never be called upon in that role that they're campaigning for to do anything actually for Palestinian people, like materially, when they can't even muster the courage to like symbolically say, yeah, it's kind of a shame that this thing that in 2023, right, when the top is Israeli human rights organizations and top international human rights organizations call it apartheid, he can't even just toe the line. He can't even come with a semblance of even a cowardly response of hey, this is above my pay grade. I'm going to go with whatever the top human rights organizations are saying, and they're saying,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't first do that. I think that's scary. And then I definitely think if you're starting at the point of I'm going to keep overfunding the police department, and that's disappointing. And it occurred to me, and I'll end here. It occurred to me that these are exactly the type of responses we would get for someone who has been, and I'm going to get criticism for this, and it's probably deserved because he's done more than I in this regard, right? But I don't claim to have done this type of organizing work. Is the type of responses we get from someone who, despite the campaign bio propaganda, is a career politician. Yes, he worked for a few years in the Chicago Public Schools before going on to be a Cook County commissioner and voting to give himself raises and things of that nature like they always do. Before that, what did he do for a living? He was a chief of staff. He was a staffer, a high-level staffer for Chicago and Cook County politicians, right? That was his trajectory. After working in leadership roles in the churches, he wanted to become a staffer. Then he got in, he bolstered his resume. It's the type of stuff you see from people that spend a few years like Barack Obama did. Yeah, I'll spend a few years in this Alinsky model just to bolster my credibility. Depending on where you come from and what your image is, you might join the military while you're already a wealthy elected official like Tulsi Gabbard, or a nepo baby like our transportation secretary, or you might, if you're from Chicago and you're a person of color, you might go the teaching route or the organizational route. But this is this thing we would expect from someone who, in fact, is a career politician, who's had more jobs than not in high levels of electoral politics, and just played around for a little bit as a few years. I know people that are only done organizing, right? That's all they've done. I know people who have only done teaching, right? Those are heroes, and people who have shown us really clearly that what they really want to do is have high paying positions of power. I think that's the type of thing we can expect. So it's disappointing, but more than that, I think it's a really helpful reminder. Because yes, I'm glad Paul Vallis is not mayor. Yes, I'm glad Lori Lightfoot is not mayor. I'm not gonna shine someone's shoes publicly who can't stand against apartheid or can't stand against, actually, when it comes down to it, murderous police force and possibly taking one penny away from them. But it's not about being disappointed in him. It's about a helpful reminder of okay, this person's in there. Let's remember we have to be antagonistic towards them. It doesn't mean you won't work with them, but we have to collectively come to our earlier conversations from a position of power, recognition of our power, and we have to bully them. It's not sufficient that Paul Vallis isn't mayor. It's not Brandon isn't he's not Brandon, right? He's mayor Brandon Johnson. We need to remember that. I grew up and I got shipped out of my neighborhood to schools where they were once President once Barack Obama was going to ran for Senate, it was Barack. Barack had we had Barack over last month to our house because his first major support was among Lakeshore liberals in Chicago and neighborhoods like Lincoln Park. This first name basis, liberal hope types of folks. Lori Lightfoot was one of those in many ways, and we lost sight of the fact that despite her being black, her being queer, that she was a white shoe millionaire corporate attorney.
Mm-hmm.
His job had failed to bring any consequences on the Chicago police force. And what happens? She ends up as mayor, covering up for murders. So I'm glad that we're going to have a different mayor, and I'm glad that if he's going to be in there, this new mayor elect has given us reasons to remember that once they're in power, whoever they were to us before, they're not our friends. Bully them.
This reminds me of, David, something you say. Remind me if I'm refreshing my memory, but as politics for a class or as a class.
Well, it's like class-rooted politics versus class-focused politics.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And like the
So
difference being that like rooted is like coming from the class versus focused is like speaking of and for the class. And like we prefer the focus versus like the, no care at all. But if you want to build winning movements that can sustain themselves, it's got to be rooted.
Yeah.
I agree.
And by the way, just so we're clear, I didn't coin that. That's like a smart guy who came up with this. Like Leo,
That was David Griscom trademark. Yeah, we gotta call the patent office. We're gonna extend that. Elias, where can people follow your work?
I'm at if you go on Twitter, I have a little link tree with all my some articles and stuff to a Substack. So if you go to @Elias Cepeda, ELIASCEPEDA, you can find me there without a check mark now. So
yeah, that's right. Elias is one of us now. He is rolling large with the check mark, and now come back down to the plebs. Yeah, definitely check out Elias's work, including this most recent piece that we just discussed about the Chicago mayor. Elias, it's great catching up with you.
Thank you so much.